Hello everyone. I know it's been a long time since the last time I posted a video, and I hope that my videos have helped you in your studies in little and big ways. So now I am back with a new video, and my topic is all about demography and migration. So what is demography and what is migration? So, in definition, demography is the statistical study of human populations. Demography examines the size, structure, and the movements of population over space and time. It uses methods from history, economics, and anthropology, sociology, and other fields. Demography is the statistical study of populations, especially of human beings. Demographic analysis can cover the whole societies or groups defined by the criteria. Meanwhile, human migration is the permanent change of residence by an individual or group. Migrations fall into several broad categories. First, internal and international migrations may be distinguished. Within the country, there are movements of individuals and families from one area to another. For example, from rural areas to the cities, and this is a distinct from movements of one country to another. Second, migration may be voluntary or it may be forced. An outlook for the 21st century. Economic and demographic disparities will shape the mobility of labor and skills during the 21st century. Richer societies in Europe, North America, and East Asia already are experiencing rapid population aging. In the future, many rich countries will confront a stagnation or decline in their native workforces. The same will happen in some emerging economies, namely China. At the same time, working age population will continue to grow in other emerging economies and in most low income countries. Just over 100 years ago, the world population totaled just about 1.5 billion people. Since then, the global population has increased almost fivefold. Today, there are about 7.2 billion people living on our planet. Of them, an estimated 232 million are international migrants, meaning people living temporarily or permanently outside of their country of birth. They represent 3% of the world's population. Economic development during the 21st century will be characterized by higher growth in today's middle and low income countries and lower growth in the current high income countries. Following the trend of the last 2 decades, more people will be lifted out of extreme poverty and more people will be joining the growing middle classes of the current and future emerging countries. Demographic change in the 21st century will be shaped by decreasing birth rates and increasing lifespans. These two trends, although largely unrelated, together contribute to demographic aging at a global scale and will have ramifications for future economic output, labor markets, and welfare systems, or at least in countries where such system exists. Economic convergence and growing demographic disparities will have an impact on future migration policies by raising the stakes in the competition for skilled and semi skilled workers. Still, many highly developed countries and emerging economies base their economic and fiscal models on the assumption that current demographic realities or stable populations or continued population growth will remain realities tomorrow. In a rapid changing demographic and macroeconomic environment, it is important for policymakers to 1. Revisit population projection and question the demographic assumptions on which existing economic, welfare, and migration policies are based. 2. Adopt key policies area to the fundamental changes in the global and regional population trends. Lastly, explore the potential of migration in bridging the gaps between youthful and aging societies and in promoting development. This brief begins by laying out the current and projected global demographic trends, the key misunderstandings in the conventional wisdom on the population trends, and what this implies for the future migration flows. Since 2000, the world population has grown at a pace of 77 million people, roughly an additional 1.1% per year. Over the next decades, the pace of global population growth is projected to slow, but the number of people living on our planet will continue to rise for another 50 to 70 years, reaching 9.6 billion in 2050. Most population's growth will be concentrated in South Asia, the Middle East, and Sub-Saharan Africa, where high fertility rates and the consequences of rapid population growth remains burning issues. It is said that after peaking at 10 billion or more, the population will start declining towards the end of the 21st century or at the beginning of the 22nd. In some regions and countries, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, the population growth already has started to come to an end. Over the coming decades, a growing number of countries will experience stagnating or even declining population sizes. In the Middle East and in Sub-Saharan Africa, however, many countries still will experience rapid population growth over the next decades, as what we can see from the data here. The shrinking number of children per family is the main driver of the reduced global population growth. At first, this will mean smaller cohorts of preschool and school children. Eventually, the size of the working age population will start to shrink. In Japan and Russia, the domestic labor force is already contracting. Europe will experience the same within the next 10 years, and China will begin to see its labor force declining after 2020. In Latin America, the labor force potential will start declining after the year 2045. Meanwhile, working age population will continue to grow in the South Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. In addition, the richer parts of the world are already experiencing rapid demographic aging, while many mid and low-income countries will soon confront it. As a result, Japan and countries of Europe today will have the oldest population age, followed by the North America, Australia, and Russia. But soon, the momentum of global aging will shift to today's emerging markets, namely to China and Latin America. These developments are highly predictable. Nevertheless, many countries are not well prepared for rapidly aging societies and declining of work. Flaws in the conventional wisdom and implications for the future migration and development. Conventional wisdom has it that people will continue moving from youthful to aging societies, as well as from today's poorer to today's richer economies. As a result, most policy scenarios assume that the rich countries of the Northern Hemisphere will continue to attract labor and skills from abroad, and that youthful Global South will fill the ranks of an aging Europe, Russia, and North America. This, however, should not be taken for granted. The current geography of migration is likely to change. There are several factors and reasons for this. These are: 1. Increased competition for skilled labor. More countries will soon enter the global race for talent and skills. China, for example, is already actively searching for highly qualified experts from abroad. Although the number of foreign workers in China is still relatively small, in a not so distant future, China's declining working age population might also create a demand for semi-skilled and low-skilled labor, effectively turning it from an immigrant sending into an immigrant receiving country, competing with Europe, North America, and Australia for workers and skills. 2. Changing economic growth patterns. Economic growth has shifted from the advanced economies to middle income and low income countries. According to International Monetary Fund or IMF, the average gross domestic product or GDP of advanced economies decreased from 2.9% per year from 1980 to 1999 to 1.8% per year in 2000 to 2013. Whereas in emerging markets, annual growth increased from 3.6% from 1980 to 1999 to 6.1% per year from 2000 to 2013. These practical implications for current and future migration patterns as former sending countries gradually turn into destination countries. 3. More domestic and regional alternatives to overseas migration. The improving economic situation in capital cities and other urban agglomerations of many traditional migrant sending countries has created domestic alternatives to international migration. Usually, this reflects declining population growth as well as industrialization and the emergence of urban service sectors absorbing rural migrants. The impact on international migration is clearly visible. For example, Mexico and Turkey, both prominent sources of migration to the United States and European Union, respectively, and they are now sending significantly fewer migrants to these destinations. Impact of migration on welfare and development. When they move, most migrants manage to improve their income, their access to education, or their personal security. As a result, international migration and internal mobility usually are the quickest way to increase mobile people's welfare and opportunities, as a significant part of this income is sent to close relatives or local communities in the country of origin. Migration also has the potential to directly improve living conditions in migrant sending regions and countries. Over time, migrants also can become agents of change in their regions and countries of origin. Some are creating trade relations, others are bringing back, also potentially causing brain drain from rural peripheries to urban centers and from low-income countries to emerging and developing countries. Socio-economic development of migrant sending regions clearly suffers from the selective immigration of younger, better educational and technological change or have started investing in their countries of origin. In a number of countries, return migrants have played an important role in promoting democracy. The possible downside of migration and mobility. There are, however, a number of negative side effects. Migrants are at risk of being exploited individually or discriminated against structurally. Employers, agents, or traffickers may be the perpetrators of individual exploitation. Migrants are sometimes paid below minimum wages, have to work underpaid, and are denied the right to change their employers. International migration and mobility are also potentially causing brain drain from rural peripheries to urban centers and from low-income countries to emerging and developed countries. Implications for policymaking. The changing economic and demographic realities of the coming decades will have a major implications for future employment and migration policies. Governments in countries with youthful and growing populations have an interest in reducing unemployment by enabling immigration and encouraging a steady flow of remittances. They should also try to engage their people in a former homeland. Governments in middle income countries with economic growth will develop an interest in facilitating return migration and prepare for the future immigration of third countries' nationals. Governments in high income countries with aging societies and stagnating or declining working age populations will need more investments in sound, forward looking, and migration policies. Many developed countries accustomed to easily finding the labor and skills they require will need to think more strategically about how to attract qualified workers. Tighter competitions for skills will put more focus on the education systems of both sending and receiving countries to supply needed human capital to the global labor market. In this context, mutual recognition of educational attainments and skills based on comparable standards would be extremely helpful. Developing middle and low income countries are at risk of losing native talent and skills through immigration. Countries can mitigate this risk by forming long-term recruitment agreements that include a commitment by migrant receiving countries to invest in the educational systems of particular sending countries. Such a step would improve the quality of education and increase the number of graduates. Receiving countries should help develop and broaden the skills based in sending countries before attracting or recruiting large numbers of skilled migrants. The lack of cooperation between migrant sending and receiving countries increases the cost of migration and decreases the positive effect on socio-economic development. Direct and sometimes excessive costs relate to visa and passports, recruiting and travel agencies, exchange commissions, fees of monies, transfer companies, and more. So, regardless of the route governments choose, many policies that address demographic change in the subsequent fundamental shifts in the labor supply require a time horizon well beyond the electoral cycle. It is therefore crucial for decision makers to consider and invest in long term solutions that can be adapted to meet the changing needs of their economies and societies. Okay, thank you so much for listening, and give this video a thumbs up if you like it, and share with your friends, your families, and thank you so much for your time. So see you until next video. This is Ray Jumao-as officially signing out. Goodbye.